is fine, but don't want to drag it out too long. Cool. Looking forward to today's session. We're basically going to have an open discussion about Andromeda. Want to bring you guys into the conversation as well if you see it being relevant. Obviously, we always like to do questions and Q&A like while we're going along as well. But Dusty and I have a bit of a method to the madness here of just some of the stuff that we want to share with you guys. But before we do that and we really get into the chat, a couple things that I want to point out on the doc. First page is just going to be like a breakdown of like strategy adjustments and things to be in consideration of. Second page is going to be more about things to do in sort of like, what's the word I'm looking for? A sort of timeline type fashion. And then the most important part, which we're going to talk quite a bit about today, is how your creative strategy needs to adjust. And I'll get into that, quite a bit more. Obviously, we've been having a lot of these conversations internally, as you can imagine. So yeah, just wanted to kind of point a couple things out there. The other thing, because obviously we've got some of our internal team on this call right now as well, but for the PTI guys, our PTI group, what was the thing that I wanted to point out? Yeah, just in terms of transparency, and I shared this a little bit last week, like the creative testing mastery testing philosophy does have to evolve from an SOP perspective based on the training material, even that we rolled out at Brant. When did we roll out 3.0? Like maybe January, February, March of this year, probably. It was kind of early Q1, right? So I just want to be just straightforward with you guys that yes, like CTM, some of CTM testing philosophy does need to evolve with this. And that's also why we're doing the discussion today, why we rolled out the doc to you guys as well, because we knew that we were sort of going to get those questions. And at the same time, obviously like, give you guys clarity on like what we're doing internally so you can go make, the necessary adjustments. Obviously, we know that we need to, again, for transparency, we know that we need to refilm some stuff, right? Just want to be straight about that. And we will do that. But I think it's more important to get you guys the information because obviously we've been sort of building this case, if you will, for, the last, 6 to 8 months. So yeah, check out the doc, all kinds of good stuff in there. Obviously, if there's something that you want clarified, just ask in Slack. We can jam on it, have a chat on it then as well. So I'm going to kick us off. We got a good group here to sort of get us started. All good, Stacy, no worries. We actually are literally just about to get started. Just gonna kind of kick off with the basics here, to kind of kick us off here, Dusty. I'm trying to pull up my notes here as well. Like, obviously we covered creative strategy. Jack did an awesome, creative strategy session last week on Andromeda. We're gonna talk a lot about creative strategy today. What is your general take so far as that you can see right now? Whether it's, getting feedback from the community, running offers yourself, or just your general consensus on what the Andromeda update means for us as advertisers.
Yeah, obviously just from that, like the conversations in, even in this community, in my circles, I know in my accounts, some of the big things are, sorry, I got my beard, so what happens when you have a beard and on my mouth, but
Brian knows
no, yeah, I would say Brian, yeah, we all know, but anyways, bearded folks aside, I guess, really, the things that are really starting to show are kind of almost like, it feels like in some senses you could, in some areas, especially on lower budgets, throw things up and they just kind of work. And sometimes, sometimes that is the case or not, but now it feels like what this update is doing is seriously exposing, lack of depth and understanding for real in actual advertising. So like in the sense of understanding messaging, really understanding ICPs, and creative, and being able to understand the data that you're seeing and how that actually is interpreted, for the sake of decision making. So like, to me, that seems like the biggest thing is if you're weak in any in either of those areas, as far as like your ability to create, produce creative, or understand creative performance and messaging, especially messaging, you know, in conjunction with that, like you're really getting your ass handed to you, you know, so to speak, I think by a lot of these updates. Like that just kind of seems to be my perspective so far. And so obviously the adaption is for anybody who's wanting to win, especially with these changes, and the obviously the agencies, the media buyers, any advertisers, any business really that's going to win is going to be, you know, obviously people who can merge those two, who have a really good understanding of buyer psychology and messaging and what drives conversions for their business or for their niche, or, you know, whatever vertical that you find yourself playing in, versus in conjunction with creative, being able to put that into quality creative. Because obviously we've known all along that the primary thing platforms like Meta, you know, TikTok, all these people care about are user interaction and engagement. Like that's their number one thing, is to keep people engaged and on their platform. And so the best advertisers are the ones who can leverage that in conjunction with buyer psychology to produce conversions and results for their clients, right? And so that kind of seems to be my sort of, you know, 30,000 foot take.
Yeah, I would say my view is very similar as well. You know, there's this sort of idea that has been thrown around. You guys have maybe heard it in posts or videos, and I'm not even really sure where I heard it originally, where, you know, Zuckerberg's goal or Meta's goal is to fully automate the media buying process, right? Like their supposed goal is to allow it so that they can develop creatives and all the messaging, and you just put your budget in and they get you the customers, right? That's generally what we're being told in terms of where they want to take the platform, right? But where I see it is, yes, that may be true, right? So maybe Meta controls some of the output, which it's already been controlling more of the output as the years have gone on, right? If we look at, you know, 2025 today versus even 2020 from 5 years ago, the platform itself is more restrictive in terms of features and functionality than, you know, when I started in, when did I start? 2010? Yeah, maybe 2010, right? And which is all to say that, you know, you will either be exposed, or if you are extremely skilled in messaging and marketing psychology, you will become at a premium. And that's how I look at it. I look at it through the lens of, you know, the strong will always prevail, right? And that's why I'm really big, as you guys know, on upskilling. Always upskill, always upskill, always upskill. Because meaning upskill, meaning, you know, creative, messaging, you know, media buying, sales, offers, you know, whatever that is. Because even I would say the landscape today, you got to be full stack, right? You've got to understand offers. You've got to understand sales psychology. You got to understand how the ad is going to impact the sales process. You know, if we're talking lead gen here, right, on that side, but even e-com, right? To just be a media buyer, you just can't be a media buyer today in the landscape of what we're doing, right? You need to be, as media buyers, we need to be more like a CMO, right? We need to understand the impact of our strategy. And where I'll tie that all together with what my first sort of interpretation when I was, obviously Jack and I have had a lot of conversations on this, as you guys can imagine, because, you know, we're looking at performance at, you know, 30,000 foot and down into the weeds like every day. And the first thing I thought was, and, you know, Jack, I think I sent you a Slack message on this where I was like, you're just going to have to be great at marketing. Like, it's just because if you remove the functionality on the media buying platform side, right, who is going to control the inputs that still gets plugged into Meta, right? The media buyer, the CMO, the strategist, whatever you want to call it. I don't care what the job title is, right? Even if Meta says, hey, just tell us who your avatar is and tell us your budget and we'll get you the customers, you still theoretically need to make the decision on who the customer is. What am I going to offer them? How much is it going to cost? What's the process in which that I'm going to go through in order to acquire that customer? The strategy, the unit economics, the messaging, you know, all of these things, right? So in reality, you're not going to be able to sort of hack your way to sort of easy results, which has generally been the consensus for the last few years now anyways, right? The media buying has actually, while they've tried to make it easier, it's actually gotten harder. Because I remember when I first started on Meta, I didn't even know what Facebook SDK developer shit was. You could just set up a pixel, start running ads, and you just start getting conversions, right?
Money.
Right, and you'd print money, right? Like 5-10x ROI. Anybody that's been around that long to run e-com stuff, you guys know that like it was actually pretty easy. You could set up a freaking DPA catalog campaign and just let it rip, right? But now like you've got to understand funnel events, which is listed in the playbook, right? The idea around like in some ways how it is more easy on the platform, it is actually becoming much more sophisticated from an attribution, a tracking, a psychology perspective to then just meet the business objective. And that was my first sort of takeaway in terms of going back to that original question of what do I think Andromeda means for advertisers? I think it's going to do the same thing that it did to advertisers with the iOS update. And then the subsequent years after that, you've seen a lot of e-commerce businesses go out of business. You've seen a lot of media buyers that don't have agencies anymore. You've seen a lot of agencies close. You've seen a lot of coaches and consultants that don't have businesses anymore because they're not getting, super high return on spend, right? I think that's what it's going to do. I think the strong will continue to prevail. And the definition of the strong will be how well do you understand market message match? That is literally it. So if we go back to even the early 1900s when we're running newspaper ads and doing freaking ads on freaking benches and shit, right? Like, I think you still have to understand messaging at its core. And I still think, and I say this obviously with love to the community here, a lot of you guys, like, you haven't been willing to take that on. You haven't been willing to take on the mastery of messaging and copywriting. And maybe I'm biased because I am a trained copywriter. I got into the industry as a copywriter. I went to school for copywriting. And I still think that is the most fundamental skill, which then leads into the creative, right? Which is that next piece. Yeah, I was a former journalist. I went to school for journalism, creative writing, and digital media, right? So I leveraged those skills into the marketing career. But I think it's just going to put that much more demand on understanding the psychology of a prospect and of a customer, which means the messaging that then goes into the creative. And that's where I want to take the next part of the conversation. And if Jack, if you want to, jump in on this, feel free to, after Dusty there, if you want. But what do you think this means for like creative specifically within the environment of Andromeda, or what the next 12 to 24, maybe even let's just say 18 months and what that looks like?
Well, I mean, obviously, like if you've taken a look at the playbook, I think you got, the answers before the test question, right? Which is a lot of creative, like a lot more production of creative. And it's not so much, it's more like deep, right? And we're talking like the word we use is diversity. That's the word Meta uses. Like they want a diversity of creative. And so like when we're talking about what that means, really it's, let's like back up the old school version, right? Like we were going to test, we're going to isolate variables. When we find the one variable that's hitting, we divert all energy into that, into that concept or that ad or that group or cluster of sort of creatives, whether that's maybe a few variations of what we know is working, right? That's how we've always traditionally talked about it, is like build on and stack on what we know is working, right?
Yeah.
Well, now the audience, it's almost like the AI is eliminating audiences altogether and we're focusing on the individual. And so what that means is, like I was literally just talking about this with a client in his attic installation, and one of their, sort of personas or potential, avatars is somebody who is like, who's conscious about the environment, eco-friendly energy, very, very small segment. He was like, I don't know if we should do that. And I was like, yes, the answer is yes. We create that and put that out there, because even though you wouldn't normally, like in the old sort of environment, target those people, that like the AI knows that, hey, this person needs this content at this stage, and so you create that because Meta can now, at least what they're toting is that they can now tell and match that specific angle, level of awareness, everything to that one individual. And so you need to provide that diversity for them. And so it's almost, and we've kind of, this is where, obviously, like we were talking about, some of the, alterations to sort of the SOP that we have is, that you wanted to try to isolate variables so that you didn't feel like you were throwing noodles at the wall and seeing what sticks. Whereas now this environment is almost every ad needs a shot, like everything needs a shot. And so there is going to be some, things that we have to do structure wise to help control and understand, like, and not just like completely throw noodles, but that level of diversity, that you have to provide now for every archetype at every level of awareness, to essentially provide the gamut for Meta to be able to choose from for all of the potential, the potential buyer journey of your customers. You know what I mean? It's deep. Like, it's going to be significantly deeper than you have imagined, and I mean,
and when you say deep, can you define deep just a little bit more? I think everybody generally knows what you mean, but let's just go a little deeper on deep.
Yeah. So, I mean, like, for example, let's say, you have 3 potential personas like this, just build off of the, the playbook that we have, right? Some of the examples. So you have 3 personas. Let's say each of those personas, maybe there's a few handful of like desired outcomes that could be potential there. Then you have, Eugene Schwartz, right? Nothing fancy there, but 5 levels of awareness, essentially, So if you look at any one of those are variables, like obviously you have 3 personas, that's a variable. Any one of those desired outcomes is a variable, any one of those levels of awareness. And so when we're creating diversity, what we mean by deep is like, okay, let's take persona A, and then let's look at, there's 4 maybe potential desired outcomes, so then now I'm going deeper into that one persona, creating content for every one of those desires, and then layer that with levels of awareness, right? So now I'm going deeper in this one persona with this particular desire with all 5 levels of awareness, creating content for each one of those, along the buyer's journey. So like when we say deeper, we're not just kind of throwing out problems, anymore and say, oh, this hook works, let's run with it. It's like, it's literally just going down the rabbit hole of possibilities for each of our archetypes or each of our, personas, and building content specifically for every particular point along that, thing that, I mean, and this is where the human element, I think, comes into back what we were just talking about with the AI is like, and you can see this with ChatGPT, like, or any of the AI out there, it does a decent job of creating a bunch of ideas and understanding like the generics of, when I say, hey, what are homeowners concerned about when it comes to attic insulation? Like, it can generally give you a pretty good idea, a list of pain points. But what it doesn't get at, obviously yet, is some of those deeper sort of emotional triggers, the things that we understand really for, the sake of solid messaging, marketing, driving conversions.
Yeah.
And so what you feed it, like what Jack was saying a second ago, how we feed this machine on that level, going deeper into these archetypes, is what's really going to drive the results. But like I said, it's going to be, you're going to have to produce way more, in that sense than you traditionally have in the past by just creating variations of what was already working. Like, you really have to lay that foundation for it to be able to pick and choose, who gets what impression,
I'm going to do a quick summary on that. And then Jack, I saw you, I think you perked up there that you wanted to chime in. My understanding, based on what you're sharing there as well, and then I just saw the comment from Cam in the chat, is that essentially Meta wants to eliminate top of funnel, middle funnel, bottom funnel campaign structure, and actually bring top of funnel, middle funnel, bottom funnel awareness to the ad set level through creative, which means, to simplify, so action item, you need to have multiple creatives based on level of awareness per ad set. Mm-hmm. So you've taken top of funnel, middle funnel, bottom funnel, consolidated structure, leveraging messaging to target level of awareness instead of audiences and campaign structure to target levels of awareness, because that top of funnel video may educate someone, which turns them from being unaware to now problem aware. That middle of funnel creative turns them now into being solution aware. And that bottom of funnel creative, which may have the best CPA, by the way, but is only like your add to cart ad, right? But none of those people get there without the top of funnel video ad, right? So going back to tying these last two things together, and then I'm going to turn it over to Jack. And I see that stuff coming in through the comments, and we'll definitely touch on all that, but I also don't want to go off track as well. So keep throwing your guys' stuff in the chat for sure. Is with deep and more creative and sophistication, kind of tying those things together, if we don't understand levels of awareness, how can you intentionally develop the creative in volume to be able to scale at KPI, right? Mm-hmm. So that's why we believe that being great at marketing psychology, understanding the messaging, and being able to say, hey, I'm going to go develop these 5 ads that target problem aware. I'm going to go develop these 5 ads that target solution aware. And guess what? You've got to do that 50 times a week now, by the way, right? So being able to do it intentionally, obviously, Jack will share some ChatGPT hacks with you guys over time. But Jack, I want to turn that over to you. Like, what do you think this means for creative? And I know that you probably, you touched on some stuff last week, but through the lens in which that we're talking about it now, what's your take on that?
So I want to, because we're evolving the winning ad formula, right? So I don't want to lose that either. Like,
yeah,
what was the theory behind the winning ad formula? Was I was taking one ad and turning it into 100, right? That was pretty much what that was built off of, right? So you do the same thing here. It's just in a different mannerism. So like, you've got first of all, hearing other people use the word archetypes like makes me happy, because creative archetypes is just a term that I just randomly came up with it, and other people are using it, so that makes me happy, right? Like we've got if I've got 90 creative archetypes, right, and then I've got 10 angles, right? So I'm going to start with that quickly, and then I'm going to speak more into the meta side of stuff. I've got 900 ads there.
Pretty cool.
Done. Like that, like, you know what I mean? Yes, I have to go make them now, but that is how we can still take the same approach of taking one ad and turn. So if I've got my angles, one of them's the solution, right? One of it, and when Will's talking about and Dusty are like the funnel aware standpoint, so mid, higher up, top of funnel, middle of funnel, bottom of funnel, cool. Well, we know, right, that an educational style video may be more top of funnel because you're trying to get somebody who's not as aware to a certain extent. And then we know like a 5 reasons why is then more like, okay, I'm aware, but I'm not solution aware. So we've got the middle of funnel. And then we've got like the expert recommends archetype. Well, great, cool. I've got 3 archetypes there with one pain point that's getting me through each of those pieces of that's getting me through each of those levels of awareness throughout the funnel as well. So what you really need to do, like literally from like a physicality standpoint, like, and in the dossier, we do this, right? The dossier, you've got all of your solutions, you've got all of your benefits, you've got your USPs, you've got your customer problems, like they're already, and if you've done that correctly within the dossier, you've got, I think there's like 10 options of each of those minimum. You should always do more, right? But if you've already got 10 of those, if I've got 10 solutions, 10 benefits, 10 customer problems, 10 USPs to my own thing, and then I've got all of my archetypes, well, you're already set up to be in a position of where you're able to start being able to create all of those different types of ads. Now you just need to realize like, cool, these archetypes are for this awareness of the funnel, and then this angle also matches this awareness. And that's when you start playing the matchmaking game. So going down the matchmaking standpoint, I was reading more stuff into the meta. So I'm pretty sure, give or take roughly, Meta has like 50,000 tags on each individual person, on each of its users. Right? So that is its idea of who we are. Obviously, it doesn't know us as a human being. It just knows us as pieces of data, right? And so each of us has like a minimum of 50,000 pieces of data. All an algorithm is a matchmaking service. That's it. So as long as you're putting the right thing out there, well, then you're making Meta's job easier. So if you're trying to reach somebody who is trying to learn about it, so they need education about it, they're really new to the game, like they've got this, like this is all being tagged under this person that Meta has, But if your content is like really bottom of funnel, super specific, not educational at all, but that's the type of person that you're trying to reach, Meta's like, I'm not going to go reach that person. I'm going to go reach the person at the piece. I use it the same as fishing, right? Like, we have to use the right piece of bait to catch the right type of fish. Different fish will like different bait. Same scenario here.
I always love the fishing analogy too, because it's like, I'll get nerdy for you for a second. In the summer, the fish go towards deeper water, right? So if you use top water lure, you ain't catching any fish.
I've got no idea. Probably. Yeah. I'll take your word on it. You know what I mean? So, but yeah, like that, I think that's one, like anything that's bait, like, and that is a perfect analogy, to be completely honest with you. It's like, you've got to give Meta the top of the, if you're in summer, you've got to give Meta the lure that goes all the way to the bottom. If it's closer to winter, you've got to give it the one that sits at the top. Like, so think of that as an awareness funnel. This could probably make a really great fucking visual, excuse my French, but like, they could probably make actually a really solid visual. So that's kind of like my 2 cents behind it now. Like, take the winning ad formula. We've kind of evolved it. Like, I'm now trying to branch it more, so just it makes more sense into like a winning angle variation instead of a winning ad formula. Yeah. So in other words, once you start finding all of those angles, now you can start plugging those angles into different archetypes. Mm-hmm. And the reason the variation of the archetype is important, by the way, is because we consume content incredibly different, right? Like, just as an example right now, my wife's pregnant. So the way that she is currently absorbing content and the things that catches her eye, she likes long form content. She likes things that are more story driven. She likes things that she can dive into and really connect to. I don't have the time for that. I need here's the best 5 tips to be the best dad possible. Or first, these are the best 5 tips, or these are the 5 Amazon buys that you have to purchase as a first time dad. We're getting the same scenario. We're both getting the exact same piece, like the same semantic, like the same feeling, the same content, the same angle, but we have to get it because we absorb stuff differently. That's all you're doing with your ads as well. This angle is going to reach this person through a 5 reasons why, because Meta knows as well. Hey, Jack likes 5 reasons why content, short, digestible pieces of info that he can take. About 8 months too late to that one, Brian. 7 months now. So Meta knows how we also are consuming our content at the same time as well. And that's also why the different content types are very important, so that it can be like, cool, you've got the right semantic, you've got the right archetype, you've got the right emotional driver. I've got a massive pool of people who fit and match those tags.
Well, and you know what's interesting about that? Like, the actual archetypes idea is something that we've been doing for a long time.
Yep.
Right? It now is going to actually make it more useful. And I think to kind of spin this into the next topic there, and I'll share my thoughts on what I think this is going to do for creative as well, is you know, this is going to force everyone here in the community, doesn't matter if we're on the if we're on the agency side or on the brand side as advertisers, we need to figure out a way to basically 10x our creative production, right? Mm-hmm. And the way that we did that before was through micro level variations. So going back to what Dusty was saying, you know, micro level variations was, this is how I take one winning ad and turn it into 100. All of you guys remember that, right? But now what we're transitioning into is more macro level variations, right? And macro level is what Jack was referring to specifically, of you can have an angle, but how can you reach 10 different people within levels of awareness with that same angle? To keep it simple for sakes of today, that's 10 different ads. Well, we have to do that every week now, right? And the way that we are going to test that structure is literally having all 10 of those ads in one campaign instead of doing one or single ad sets with dupes if you're still running Pocket Theory, or worst case CTM 3.0, which is the same as CTM 1.0, one concept, 3 messaging variations. So in a lot of ways, actually, it's going back to the origin of how we used to test going back into 2018 to 2020, which is take one core concept and come at it from 10 different messaging angles, right? Or take one messaging angle and go at it from 10 different creative structures, basically. And so where I really see this heading, and it's funny because Jack took the first pass actually at creating the document. We had been feeding sort of stuff on Andromeda to each other. And then I read through the doc and I was like, the first thing that I wrote down is I said, hey, Jack, this is going to put a significant demand on creative production. And the thing that I really want to share with you guys, and you may not be prepared with this yet, but I would suggest getting prepared, is starting to think how you can ramp up your creative production capacity. That might mean hiring additional video editors. That might mean building an AI creative strategist, AI that can handle a lot of creative strategy for you. That could mean hiring an additional design editor. That could mean maybe finally selling UGC to your clients because for this, that, or the other reason, maybe you've been afraid to or whatever. You're going to need that. You're going to need all of that creative if you want to survive, let alone thrive in what the next wave of advertising is going to look like. Because I know what we've done at the ground level, you guys don't even want to know how many micro variations we pump out on a week. It is absurd. And a lot of times we don't even use all of them, which is also absurd.
Right.
But at that point,
A whole nother
well,
topic.
like if Meta's demanding creative diversity, how are you guys going to get all of that content, right? We need to build the system, we need to build the team, or we need to restructure how we acquire that content in order to be able to continue to deliver performance. All of you guys are going to have a different interpretation of how to go about that. Some of you are going to be more comfortable with AI, some of you aren't, and that's okay. But I think the big takeaway there is, and what I believe what this is going to do for creative, it's going to put a whole lot more demand on how you develop the actual angle. And you could do that in a variety of different ways. You could do it manually or you could do it through AI. And it's also going to put a demand on how you actually get the asset. Can I get 100 assets this week instead of 10? Can I get 50 this week instead of 10? Right? Because guess what? You're going to just be killing creative tests in 24 to 48 hours. How long are you going to wait until you can get the next test launched? Right?
You're going to want to templatize your archetype development process. Like that would be step one as soon as possible.
Yep.
If you have editors or an editing system or anything that you work with, like you just need to be able to say, hey, this is the angle, this is the archetype, this is the core emotional driver behind it. Like you need to develop a plug and play system for that to happen so that it doesn't need to be perfect first time around, right? Like good is better than perfect because good actually gets done. So at least then once you get it out there, you can get the feedback behind it. But like that's one of our biggest focuses internally right now is more so the understanding of like, hey, what exactly does a 5 reasons why look like? Got it. It has the background. It's got B-roll footage here. It does a title screen first. It can break up into a carousel as well. Sweet. So as soon as we have a 5 reasons why example now, we have the angle, we have the text overlays. There's the B-roll, and you know the exact template that that's going to follow. So start templatizing your creative archetypes. Don't try and be fancy with them. Don't try and be special with them. B-roll content is about to become your best friend. Like more than anything else, B-roll content is going to become your best friend first and foremost. And then afterwards, like what Will said with the UGC standpoint, like UGC already creates varied content. You're never going to get the same piece of content twice. So I would highly recommend as well, like what Will said, like whether it's clients, whether it's yourself, like realize the investment in UGC is definitely going to have a huge turnaround on it. And then if you are lucky enough, like what some people have, a couple of our clients will do so, you have an owner of a company who is also very comfortable on camera. If you have that and you're not taking advantage of it, you're falling behind everybody else. If you can do any type of founder story, founder point of view, founder testimonial, founder Q&As are one of our favorites at the moment. Brian can attest to that from us internally for 2 of our offers technically, but one of them more specifically. Like if you do have a founder that can get on camera, or even just somebody internally in the, could be a coach, it could be anybody to a certain extent. If you can get someone who can answer questions, Q&A style, etc., like the most common questions, again, another really easy way for you guys to be able to start getting as much variety of content as possible. Don't overwhelm yourselves and don't overcomplicate things, because I have a feeling that that's how a lot of people are going to end up feeling. Like, try not to get yourself too. I have 90 creative archetypes. I guarantee you we probably use about 25 to 35% of them. It just makes me feel better knowing that I have a bunch of other ones in there if I really need to do so. You'll start finding the winning archetype. You'll start for your offer. When you're an agency, if you've got multiple offers with multiple ICPs, you have to have 4, 5, 6 times more than just somebody who's just running their own individual brand or their own individual offer. Because you just do. We've got so many people that we have to reach out to instead through all of the different avenues. So yeah, that's kind of like my thoughts on that as well.
Mike, I saw you raise your hand there. Was there something that you wanted to comment there on the creative specifically, or would it conversation go in a little bit of a different direction?
Somewhat of a different direction, with thoughts around testing and what you said about killing test every.
Well, that's what I was going to get into next. So we're going to talk testing next. And then obviously if there's still questions on that, we're going to hang out. There's a bunch of questions in the chat. We'll do all that Q&A. But that's where I was going to steer the conversation next, was into testing. And I'll sort of kick this part of it off, and then Dusty, I'll open it to you as well. You know, I'll just kind of pose the question out there of, what does this look like for how testing needs to evolve? Or what about testing needs to evolve? Or what parts of testing are going to need to evolve? At a practical level, how I'm visualizing this now is essentially phase 1 message testing merges with phase 2 creative testing, which basically means, let's say you're running 10 or 20 ad sets where you're just doing message testing on all of those individual, if you want to call them ad units. A lot of consolidation there. The other big piece of consolidation, yes, Diana, there will be a recording. The other big piece of consolidation that I see is, we talked about it a little bit there, but the top of funnel, middle funnel, bottom funnel type of structure really kind of moving into a one campaign structure. And we've even seen that. I know Joe is on the call. As you guys know, we run a lot of affiliate offer style structures as well. There are accounts now where we can't even get remarketing working and activating from a campaign perspective, right? I know, Brian, you're nodding your head as well. We've scaled a lot of offers into 20, 30K a day or more, where it is like straight up top of funnel, no remarketing campaigns at all. But because there's a lot of high intent based messaging in those campaigns, we're able to scale to 10, 20, even 30K a day or more within that type of structure. And I really started seeing that probably going into like Q4 of last year, which you guys may not know this. The initial rollout of the Andromeda update goes back to December 2024. And then it started ramping up in January 2024 with the financial sector and the health sector. And then I think it was like, I want to say it was July, I remember seeing on the timestamp, and then the final rollout was in October, and that's why we've really accelerated bringing the information out here now over the last few weeks, is because the final rollout. And so that second point of consolidated structure, again, just to recap, is, and I would say obviously test this, right? It is likely that is going to perform differently for everyone in your accounts. Of maybe not even running remarketing anymore from a campaign level perspective, because Meta can match level of messaging and awareness within the campaign based on the creative, in spite of whether you say that it's engaged audience, video view, video view audience, or a website visitor audience or whatever, right? So that's the next thing. And then the third thing, where I really see from a testing structure perspective specifically, is and I actually just watched a video on this like the other day, moving more towards like just straight scaling and creative testing campaigns, or if you want to call it prospecting and scaling, but where all of your testing is happening in one campaign, but then 10, even 20 ads in an ad set, instead of one ad sets where you're either doing one core video with 3 messaging variations. Instead, you might do more of a 3x3 formula or a 4x3 formula. And I'll be specific about what I mean by that. It could be, let's just say 3 different videos times 3 different versions of messaging. 3 times 3 equals 9. So you may be running a 9 ad set. So I'll talk to Brian here, because Brian, you and I haven't talked ads very much recently. What I see it as is like, instead of separating creative tests by ad sets, so like 3 creative tests, each creative test per ad set, all creative tests, 1 ad set, same budget, right? So we can actually conserve budget, how I'm seeing it. We can actually conserve budget by not having to spend 3 times as much to test 3 times as amount of creative. We could actually still test it at a $50 ad set budget, $100 ad set budget, and have all 9 ads in the ad set, because that's what Meta is pushing for so much as that I can see from that side of things. I meant to mention this earlier. I actually have the Meta documentation page on the Andromeda update that I want to share with you guys as well. So Brant, if you can remind me, I have the link. It's literally like stored in my phone. I'm going to share like their technical, description of all of that with you guys as well. But yeah, just wanted to give you guys a visual there. And I'm not hung up on this like 3x3 thing. I'm not going to roll it out as like an SOP tomorrow, because I do think that you could go 5 creatives times 3 divergent, messaging angles. I think you go 3x3. I think you can go 4x3. But what I see is that Meta wants volume to be able to literally hit the audience with all of the options that you are giving it. And then I think that's actually better for all of us, because then we can look at ad tests at a ad set or campaign level instead of individual ad performance. And then we can judge the performance based on the totality of the testing, which that's what Mike was asking. And Jimmy also asked about kill points, is looking at the collective of our tests together instead of meaning from a kill point and a CPA perspective, versus just only having to look at every individual test, which I believe should make actually, I don't have any substantiated data on this, but where I believe that budget efficiency will be a result of that, because we just won't have to spend 3 times as much to validate those tests. So that's my interpretation of it there in terms of testing. How do I think this is going to impact testing? I know I hogged the mic quite a bit there on that one, Dusty, but I'm curious if you have, just from a coaching standpoint, or whether it's been working with, some of the questions that you've been getting, or, some of the things that you're seeing, like, do you see anything different, or any, do you have any other unique perspective to add to that?
Well, I think that's for the lack of words, right? The mind fuck on this whole thing, right? is we're used to, obviously with, the whole CTM, variable isolation, right? Like, we're so focused on that because like it's really been super scientific, and obviously to great avail, right? A lot of success comes from, doing that. Whereas this feels like they're taking that ability away from us. But I think like what you just said sort of sums it up. It changes the distribution and a little bit of the strategy, but the same concept sort of, still apply. From example, it just aggregates it on maybe an ad set level, right? Instead of at the ad level. And so like what, for example, like Jack was saying, 9 archetypes, right? 10 archetypes. But let's say that we have one problem with 9 archetypes, right? Well, that one variable, right? Like the problem now becomes your ad set, right? With your 10 archetypes that you're attacking a bunch of that problem from a bunch of different angles from that perspective. And so you can look at that collective as your sort of variable, because really like from like the testing perspective, at least from what I'm seeing, it's like one or few ad sets, right? Really campaign structure as far as its ability to manage. And so, being able to launch ads in packs kind of gives us the ability to sort of like see things still just aggregated, and if we're being honest, like the way that I've always looked at CTM when I'm testing everything is always from the ad set level anyways. Like I was always killing on the ad set level based on our kill rules before I ever even dove to the app. Like I wouldn't give it a chance if I didn't see things early for the sake of doing that. So it's the same sort of, at least to me,
Yeah,
very much the same concept. I'm to be honest, I'm just giving it a little more headroom, obviously in the budget, because you're using so much creative in the ad on the ads content, and then allowing it to choose, where it's going to stick it in those, in those sort of things. But if I'm controlling it to some extent, and you don't want to get too restrictive, I think that's another side of the coin, because that seems to be the opposite of it, is when you start to restrict the algorithm and do things like you see less performance. Like I know a test I was doing just this last week was like the utilization of caps, right? Cost caps in conjunction with all of this. And like I had literally the same ad set. Like I put the caps on and we were getting okay distribution at CPL, but it was like, it would not feed out. And I could bump the cap by 20, 30, 40, 50% above what usually does. And it just would not feed out more than $200, $300. Doesn't matter. I was getting the results, but it would not feed out. Take the cap off and it would blow through $600. Same exact ads, no conversions. And so then it was like, there's a lot of like, so then that I think is the big fear, is like, okay, I'm just going to allow this thing to run amok, and what's going to happen with that. And so you get a lot of these questions about kill points. And I think it's just an understanding that we're essentially like, we're still able to sort of do it in the same thing, just at a different level, And I mean, maybe you can get into some specifics, or Jack or anybody else can get into specifics about what you look for in that sort of thing, and metrics and that sort of stuff, which I think, is kind of on talking points too, is like, well, what do you kind of use as your indicators on how you actually, call it good on a concept or what have you, but I mean, there's a million things you could talk about there, but I just wanted to kind of throw that in there. I think that's the big sort of, mind boggle of the whole thing, was like, well, how do I have any kind of control now if I'm just letting it do it? And it's, again, it's those inputs. And I think you can still provide diversity by going deep into one particular area and then isolate by that area. And as long as you're providing diversity, then you're able to sort of still control a little bit of the inputs to be able to make decisions.
I've even seen like, even with caps, I mean, this happened like once or twice, but like it would blow out budget and be completely just ignored the caps that were even in there. And it was like, what the fuck happened here? But like, but then, I guess, and then the other side of it too is like, in terms of structure, every account's going to be different, obviously, as time rolls on. Like everyone's going to be performing differently, but like, to your point, Will, like I think we're talking about like the same account, but like reeled back, maybe having 3 or 4 ads in it because it was spreading budget around in that ad set, versus where many times it will push that delivery to usually 1 or 2 ads. So reeled back, so it wasn't spread out as much. But again, this is all going to be account to account. What you see and how it kind of behaves.
Yeah, for sure. I think. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I think that's what you hit on right there. I think is from my perspective, just in the questions, some that seem to come in, or the conversations that I've had over the past few weeks. That's the fear, is like, well, when it pushes 1 or 2 ads, like that's one thing, because you can pretty quickly like cut losers. It's when you have 9 ads and it like evenly spreads across, and now you're $400 in on an ad set, but on an ad level, it hasn't really even spent enough on an individual ad level to like, for you to be able to say this ad sucks, And so then it's like, well, shit, do I just keep spending money? What if it never works? You know what I mean? And those are the things where I think, like,
that's
if I'm being honest,
I think that's actually a good segue, which will tie some of Mike's question and some of the questions into the chat there as well. Is I think we'll have to be more intentional about theming ad sets. Basically, theming. You called them packs. I like the word packs. I think Joe, you've done a good job of this. I think Joe is still on the call. I've seen it in your accounts, where like. Because yes, we are giving up some control in this new update, right? With how they just want to force diversity. We have less ad variable micro isolation, control. But if we're theming tests at an ad set level, going back to that example of the $400 in spend, we can then kill the entire test, aka the ad set, instead of having to look at all the individual performance per ad, right? So I think we're going to have to be more intentional of what physical ads that we put together when we run a test. And it would be important to not, and I'll just do it at the practical level, not pair, you know, problem solution ads together with most aware solution messaging in the same ad set, right? Because you want to try to judge apples and apples and oranges and oranges versus apples and oranges. Well, yeah,
And still provide diversity.
And yeah, and still be able to provide diversity. And I know that that is quite theoretical, right? Like we would actually all need to see that in practice and whatnot. But I think if you're truly looking for the definition of understanding, the way that you group your ads and your messaging and your creatives together will give you the clarity to be able to not have to spend 2 times CPA on every individual ad. Let's say, I don't remember if you said that there was 10 in that example that you made up. So that way we're not, you know, we're not having to spend $1,000 on those 10 ads in the one ad set and then we're letting it run. It's like, no, we're still keeping the kill point at the ad set level and we're just saying, hey, all 10 of these suck. Let's move on to the next pack, right? Unless you have some substantiated reason, like this messaging angle has performed and I've spent $100,000 behind it, and for whatever reason, this set of messaging did not perform that I launched. That goes back to the origin of our conversation, which is data interpretation and decision-making understanding is the core of everything that we're talking about today, right? Like the ability to think business level objectives as a borderline CMO type at the media buying level, even though we're looking at ads, we need to be able to make that decision. And that is the biggest thing that the humans will control, is that decision-making capability until it goes away from an AI and a bot's perspective and all the things, right? Is that ability to make the decision in that moment is like the differentiator in that scenario. Where was I going with that? Because what was I going with that? Yeah, if, you know, depending on how you're grouping your actual creatives into a pack of tests together, you're either going to confuse yourself or give yourself clarity. I think that's what I was trying to say. You're either going to confuse yourself or give yourself clarity. So those would just be my final thoughts on that. What'd you say?
No, I was just saying, yeah, I think that sums it up pretty well.
Yeah. Well, I want to leave at least like 10 minutes for questions, and I know that the chat was like lighting up. So I'll definitely scour the chat there. But does anybody have a live question that they want to ask or pose to the group? Yeah, go ahead, Gio.
So I was wondering if you would launch a new offer right now, what structure would you set up, and like how would you translate? Because that's my main struggle, like the dossier with all your different hooks. You have all your different levels of awareness. You have all your different creative types. I don't know where to start.
Yeah. You mean with like campaign setup, I think is what you're referring to.
Yeah, I mean like campaign setup, and then what type of things do you test in one ad set? So is it one ad set for each level of awareness? Do you have one ad set for each creative type? Is one ad set a mix of A, B, C?
I think Jack wants to take this one.
Yeah, he's a beast.
So the way that I would set it up is that angle being the ad set. So like that's more so the part of it. So like
what you mean by angle?
Yeah, so like the ad, so like one of our offers is like a CEO Finance Academy type offer, right? So we train CEOs how to use their money correctly versus relying on their tax accountants, bookkeepers, etc. So the angle of that, right? One of my angles in that could be like, I'm making $5 million a year, but I'm taking home $60,000. Like, in other words, why are my profit margins so small? So the angle now is like my profit margins are too small. Now what I'm going to do is that's my ad set. And now the way that I would now create that from a creative standpoint is like 5 reasons why your profit margins are so small. Got it. 5 reason 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Found a testimonial. So the owner will, other will, is like, he's now going to answer the question, right? I'm going to pose a TikTok response question that says, I make $5 million a year, but my margins are less than 5%. Cool. Now Will's going to do an answer. Oh, this happens a lot of time, blah, 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 blah. So my ad set is under the realm of like, why do I make so much, but my profit margins are so small? That's one problem that I'm dealing with right now. And so then all of my creative archetypes are then going to be my 5 reasons why, my founder question and answer, my founder testimonial, my whatever. I have a list of them here that I can't pull off the top of my head. Now, another ad set, right, can now then be instead, it might be like, where's all of my, well, that's similar to margins, but like, where's all of my profit going? Or I don't know how to hire somebody, or I can't afford to hire somebody. Why? Got it. So the angle here is not being able to expand your team or struggling to be able to hire new people. 5 reasons why you can't hire new people. Hey, Will, why can't I hire new people even though the company's making X amount of money a year? Got it. Well, it's because you don't know where your current expenses are. Like, that's that angle being that it's almost like the title of the, like, think about it in this mannerism, right? To a certain extent, it's the genre of the ad. So is it a horror? Is it a comedy? Is it this? Is it that? Right? That's the tag. That's the question that people are almost asking, or the problem, or the pain, or the desire, or whatever it is that they are after, or that they need solved. And then all you're doing is you're packaging that up in multiple different vehicles, archetypes, and saying, do you want the answer this way? Do you want it that way? Do you want it that way? Do you want it that way? Because I've got it in every which way possible that you could possibly want.
And then, because you described a lot there, and I want to make sure that Geo has like a really clear next step, I would still focus on core marketing 101, identify core problems that prospect has, and then go develop creative on the creative archetypes based on those problems, and then separate your ad sets based on those individual problems. So that way there's like a clear, okay, I can visualize this, I can structure my test this way. You know, maybe you've got problem 1, problem 2, problem 3, and then you've got, and I'm just going to use random numbers, 9 ads, 9 ads, 9 ads. Now we've got 27 ads, right? And then you're just going to focus on variation. Problem 1 has 3 videos, 3 variations. Problem 2 has 3 videos, 3 variations. That's 9. Problem 3 has 3 videos, 3 variations. That's 9. So you can quickly just sort of multiply the volume, still in that iteration, you know, type of way. But so that way, you know, okay, structure ad sets based on individual problems, especially because I'm, you know, trying to test for a new offer. And that way you can get a lot of volume of testing done pretty cost effectively. And hopefully after going through just a couple of rounds of that, you'll get a lot of clarity of seeing what is working, you know, when you sort of analyze all of that. Does that help provide clarity? Do you at least feel?
Yeah, absolutely. That helps a lot. Is there a list of the creative archetypes and in what order to test them?
There is a list, yes, and we haven't rolled it out yet, but there's not in terms of a priority. We will be sharing the creative archetypes database. You shared that with them on last week's call, didn't you?
I don't think I shared the creative database.
Okay.
You know, keep some things under my hat a little bit. But
I get that. I was wondering if it's public for.
It's up to Will. If Will doesn't mind me sharing it, I'll share it. The one thing that I do want to add to it at the moment that it doesn't have is kind of like the funnel awareness level of it. It has like the emotional triggers and stuff behind it, and like the sentiment and like when to use it. But the one thing that I potentially might add to it, because it sounds like it might help a lot of people, is like what awareness level that creative archetype is most beneficial for.
Like a comparison ad is great, like bottom funnel style content. Like
correct.
A how-to ad is a better top of funnel style.
Correct. An educational gets you up there, whereas a comparison or like a before and after is going to make you purchase, whereas the educational is going to get you into it. So let me add that last section and column to it, and then from there, if Will gives me the go ahead, we can share it with.
Yeah, I definitely, I've had a few people actually ask about it. So yeah, we'll circle back with you guys on that. Maybe just do like a little creative research though there in the meantime. And we'll get that out to you guys. I'm going to answer a couple quick ones in the chat that I can rapid fire, and then I'll go to Jamie and then Joe. Cameron asked, for ads that aren't spending, do we not touch them or remove them? Do the ads that aren't getting a lot of love still contribute to the health of the ad set? Yes. So going back to earlier in the chat there around how ads are contributing to the performance of other ads, because that awareness is leading to, a conversion within the other ads. That's why we generally want to work towards ad set level kill points instead of ad level kill points. And, the way that you group your ad sets, everyone here is probably going to do it 30 different ways, right? So just keep that in mind. But the more clearly that you group your creatives together, then you can judge that test as a collective versus putting, yes, diversity, but try to create a theme or a pattern to how you're structuring that diversity. Jamie, I know you probably saw this one, but is there a reason to do phase 1 message traffic testing anymore? No. I would just consolidate that in with phase 2, 10 versions of the ad, just run, one ad set basically with 10 versions of the same ad. This also affects audience. That also affects audience exclusions then, Juliana said, so we can focus the campaign more on retargeting in top of funnel. Yes. So you could have, for example, a testimonial video within a top of funnel, I say air quotes, top of funnel campaign, because some of y'all might know I've never agreed with the whole top of funnel strategy. And I've been sharing that for like 5 or 6 years now. Because if you have bottom funnel level of awareness in your top of funnel campaign, that's not a top of funnel campaign. That is a bottom of funnel campaign that you are prospecting with, right? And so, yes, how I would understand it is you're going to have, going back to, what Dusty and what Jack were saying, if you have a most aware level of awareness, which is bottom of funnel, having those creatives in the same ad set or in the same campaign as a problem aware creative, which is going to be middle of funnel, and a unaware creative, which is going to be truly top of funnel. That needs to be tested, obviously, in practicality versus just in theory. But yeah, higher levels of intent of messaging, there is what is truly more of like a retargeting ad.
Can I tag in on there for
Yeah.
a second? Because I think there's an important distinction to understand too about when we talk top of funnel, middle funnel, bottom of funnel. You have and I think this is where even in the messaging and the copywriting, sometimes people get confused, is there's a level of awareness, right? Which is like when I'm creating ads that I would say are level of awareness, I'm talking about unaware being top of funnel, most aware being bottom of funnel. But then there's also in conjunction with my product when I'm talking about cold and warm audiences, right? And so like, for example, people who have never seen my ads before, or people who have engaged with my ads, people who have clicked my landing pages, who have added to cart, right? Like, so there's kind of two distinctions. And so like Sam's video, he talks about this, this distinction is like in Andromeda, if you're literally just targeting like a small audience of people who went to your website or something like that, it doesn't really engage in the same way because those audiences are already restricted. And so like you could potentially have a separate campaign, just for that. But what we're talking about specifically here, obviously, is like the levels of awareness as far as top of funnel, middle of funnel, bottom of funnel, and it's all technically really for cold, us, warm, hot. Right. It's really at the same thing, but I mean, and when we're prospecting, even on all of those levels of awareness, like of trying to catch somebody, they're still cold to us. So we would, it's a prospecting campaign, but we're just getting significantly more surgical with the content as far as the messaging is concerned that we serve in our prospecting. Anyways, I figured I don't know if that just made it more muddy or clarified.
Clarification for sure, because top of funnel, middle funnel, bottom funnel can easily be misconstrued based on temperature or awareness level of traffic.
Right.
And that is also relevant to whether they're familiar with the brand or not as well.
Correct.
So go ahead, Jamie, and then we'll go to Joe as well.
Well, thanks for all that great information. And yeah, you answered my question about phase 1. So how would you, let's say you're starting, a new account and you're trying to find the right angles, the right creative, the right messaging and things like that. Like usually what I do is I'll draft like 20 to 30 hooks for like offer, problem solution, for promise. And you have like 60 different hooks, the same thing for headlines. How would you go around like testing those? Would you do the same thing as phase 1, but just like in a phase 2 campaign, just have like 10 per ad set, and then just
Yeah,
Right.
that's what we were kind of talking about with like theming, is that way you can still have clarity on like what style of messaging is converting the best based on the target KPI that you have. So yeah, I think you still want to bring that type of thinking and that strategy and that philosophy into your physical creative testing. And I think the more that you're willing to group those, promise style of messaging, problem style of messaging individually on their own versus, coupling them together in packs, I think I'm definitely going to start using the word packs. It'll just give you that clarity. And I think that's what I'm the biggest advocate of for all of us, is that the way that you guys are, setting up your tests, it's giving you guys the clarity so that when you are going to the analysis phase of this whole thing, you're like, oh, okay, these 5 ads were targeting the same level of awareness. And this one in particular is the top performer. There's a reason why that is, versus comparing an ad that targets an unaware person to an ad that targets an aware person. Most likely the aware person is going to have the best CPA because it's going to have the highest conversion rate. Most likely, I say that with take that with a grain of salt, right? Because their level of awareness is going to be higher towards moving towards the solution, whereas somebody who is unaware, not going to be as likely to move towards the solution. So yeah, I just think be intentional with what you sort of pair together, so that, when you're looking at it, you're looking at it comparing, promise messaging to promise messaging, problem messaging to promise or problem messaging. And you can sort of get as much control there as you can. Obviously, that needs to be handled at, like, we can look at that stuff at an individual basis, when we do our, ad strategy calls and stuff like that. But at a theoretical level, that's how I would look at it.
Okay. And would there be a maximum of ads that you put in an ad set?
Literally in the documentation, they say up to 50, bro. I'm not even kidding. So like, yeah, it's wild. I don't have a stance on that yet. Obviously the higher the budget is, the more ads that you can pack in there.
It says to be honest, so it wants consolidated campaigns. So there's no need, like, if you've got a winning angle and you've got your winning angle ad set and everything, there's no point in creating a new ad set. Go and upload that video into that ad set, or that new ad into that ad set. So you don't need, like, what you're going to realize is that your ad sets are probably going to have more ads in them, and there's just going to be a bunch of them that are off. Funnily enough, Joe's actually was doing this like over summer for one of the brands that we were working on, but that's where the volume of it is irrelevant. It's going to matter on spend more than anything else. But refresh your ad set almost, or refresh the campaign, however it is that you're going to have it set up. But don't be afraid to introduce the new ads into the same ad set that is around, because that ad set now is like a little brain. So like that ad set knows exactly. So if you're putting the right pieces of content into that ad set now, it's going to be able to start finding, like, and take that piece of content and be like, yeah, cool, I'm good to go. I know exactly where I'm going with this.
Yep. That's how I've seen it, like in real time as well.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
Sorry,
go ahead.
Good. Let Joe go first, and I'll talk. I didn't
Go ahead, Joe.
All right, cool. What's up? Cool. Thanks for the shout out, Will, on getting a few things right. I linked that Sam video. So the 8:30 mark, I'm making small changes to be more in line with what he suggests.
Yeah.
Essentially, like, thinking of these ads have this angle, and I'm doing angle largely by either text overlay or motion hook. A little bit of judgment there, and then putting the ads with the same angle into the same ad set. Yeah. Like I said, question I actually had this for Jack the end of last week. So I presented a couple weeks ago about using our standard phase 1 with a ton of messaging testing to scale up. That worked really well over the summer. And I'm wondering, I read over, the game plan. And I think Jack and I disagree on this a little bit right now. I didn't see how that tactic would become less effective as a result of Andromeda, but we didn't actually talk about it. I didn't see a gotcha in there, but I'm wondering if there is, should I be taking our top 3, 4, 5 ads and running 10 to 15 messaging tests a week on a high spending account? Is that
are those the micro adjustments or micro tests that Facebook is going to not favor now?
Yeah, I think this might sound, what's the word? Contradictory to some, because I would look at low spending accounts and high spending accounts differently.
Yeah.
Yep. And so, you know, for a lot of you guys, that's why I'm saying you're not going to need to worry as much about this whole separation of phase 1 and phase 2. I do believe that phase 1 still has its place. Do I feel like you have to do it? No, because I feel like you can do it in phase 2. However, the caveat to that would be, you know, the offers where you want to be able to spend 20, 30, 40 grand a day on, the most fastest effective way to still get volume of tests out is going to be to run phase 1. Right. But for some of you guys who are operating on tighter budgets, I'm talking about under $1,000 a day, $500 a day, right? You guys have to get into the conversion based side of this whole formula and framework as fast as possible. Right. And, you know, and I understand that. So instead, it's probably a little more effective for you guys to just do your message testing there in conjunction with your conversion testing in like a phase 2 creative testing environment. But I think if you really want to break through, you've got to pump out more tests, right? The downside is you guys can't, with lower budgets, you can't pump out more volume because fundamentally you can't pump out as much creative as what somebody who's spending 20, 30, 40 grand a day can, right? Because we have the production system to be able to back it up as well, right? You guys have to be able to get into results quick and get into creative quick. And it's, you know, phase 1 is sophisticated. Like, let's not get it twisted as well. Like you still have always had to understand levels of awareness, even with phase 1 testing. Right.
Oh, yeah.
And so I still think generally, whether you think phase 1 or not phase 1, it's still based on targeting levels of awareness, whether you're going after, you know, promise oriented messaging, solution oriented messaging, you know, et cetera, most aware oriented messaging. So yeah, Joe, I definitely think that there's a place, because we all know, especially internally, when we've been able to unlock new ads or find a new level of performance, it's come from firing out 100 message tests and 1 or 2 of them where we're like, oh shit, there's the one that we've been waiting for, right? But if you're operating on tight budgets, it's hard to pump out that much volume of tests, right? So you kind of have to do it at a consolidated level on lower spend and just prioritize conversion dollars, you know, there as well. Obviously, message testing is cheap, you know, and it's cost effective, but you also have to be able to have the creative to back it up.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I'm wondering if just how that's going to work. It's been less effective in October, but also I'm working on offers that are out of peak season.
Yeah, true.
Looking at it 2 different ways, like, is this still going to rip? It was really effective, and it was surprising. I've never scaled on just a bunch of messaging like that way before. But yeah, I'm wondering if that's, I mean, that was what I presented here a couple weeks back. Like, hey, once you have traction, write a lot of messages, go find organic sources and put that into your test and run it in. Yeah.
I'm a massive advocate of the organic, obviously, research piece for sure. Like 100%. Everybody should be doing that.
Yeah, I'll just see how effective it is going forward.
Well, yeah, I mean, in your case in particular, right? Like, we're running a lot of health offers and things like that. They typically will perform better towards the end of Q4 than in that in-between period of like end of Q3 into Q4. And then obviously the first 6 months of 2026, they're just, it's all take off the gloves and let it rip, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, for sure. Cause even like last year, a lot of our health offers performed great in like November and December. So we're kind of even just starting to get towards that period now.
I see it.
Yeah, man. Good catching up with you here. Does anybody else have a live question they want to ask? before we wrap up? I feel like I tried to tie a lot of the stuff from the chat into like generally what we were covering as well. Hard to obviously touch on everything too, but honestly, I think this was one of our better sessions here in a little while. So I'm glad that we were able to have like a really in-depth discussion. Obviously we'll share out the recording if anything comes up for you guys, like in terms of wanting more clarity, or you think of something else that you wanted to ask. As always, pop it in Slack. We'll jam there. But good hang session today. Obviously, as always, too, once the video saves, we'll get that recording out to everybody. It'll be uploaded to the portal. You know, if there's something you guys want to circle back on, it'll be there. And yeah, we'll catch you here really soon. And if you feel like I missed something from the chat, feel free to just go ahead and pop that in Slack as well. And we'll circle back on that too if I missed something. Or, you know, tag Dusty or something there too. So we'll catch you guys here really soon. Great hanging out.
Cool.
Adios.
See you guys.
See ya.
Later.